Welcome back to Faust, Unravelling the Great Enigma. I am Rebecca, and with me is my sister Sarah. Before we step into the library and meet Faust for the first time, we want to pause, to gather our thoughts and share what has been unfolding in these early episodes. Faust is not a story to be hurried. It invites us to breathe with it. So thank you for joining my sister Sarah and me to prepare ourselves to meet Faust. Thank you, Sarah. It's great to have you back with me for this discussion.
Thank you, Rebecca. It is so great to be here with you. I love these conversations. These early moments, the dedication and the prologue in heaven, they set such a gentle but profound stage. They remind us that before Goethe introduces conflict, he introduces memory and awe. And I think it helps to revisit that before we move forward. Goethe begins not with plot, but with longing. The dedication is a poem of remembrance of friends who shaped him, early hopes, early wounds. It tells us that great works begin in vulnerability, not in certainty.
I agree, Sarah. The dedication feels like stepping into a room where every shadow is a memory. Creation begins with remembering who we loved, who we were, who we hope to become. It says to us, before you meet Faust, meet yourself. And somehow that softens us for what comes next.
Yes, it creates a tenderness, prepares the mind and the heart.
And then Goethe lifts us to the heavens. Raphael, Gabriel, Michael. This living cosmic symphony. When I hear Raphael's voice and words, awe rises in me. It feels as though the universe is not indifferent. It moves with purpose, with harmony. And for a moment, we are held within that harmony.
Oh, I agree. This is not theology. It's orientation. Goethe is saying, look up, remember the vastness. Let wonder prepare you for the human struggle.
Before we face Faust's sorrow, Goethe gives us wonder. Before we encounter confusion, he gives us belonging.
And then Mephistopheles enters, sharp and clever. Their exchange reveals something essential. Faust's struggle is human. It's not abstract. Towards Faust himself, for we are made of human flesh. That line, it points us back to ourselves. What strikes me most is that Goethe doesn't begin with despair. He begins with possibility, memory, awe, perspective. It's as though he wants us to understand the grandeur and tenderness of existence, where we meet a man who has forgotten both. Before we move into Faust's study in the next episode, it might be helpful if we linger a moment on the world that shaped Goethe himself, because Faust didn't emerge from a vacuum. It was born out of a time of immense intellectual and emotional change.
Yes, that is an excellent idea. When we understand the times, we understand the man, and when we understand the man, we begin to understand the magnitude of Faust.
Goethe grew up during the German Enlightenment, or Aufklärung. I don't think I pronounced that properly. It was a period filled with new ideas about reason, about science, and human possibility. Thinkers of the time were challenging old structures and inherited tradition. Instead, we're turning towards knowledge, experimentation, and individual freedom.
And I can hear that in Faust's early longing, his frustration with the limits of knowledge, with what books cannot give him, echoes this Enlightenment hunger for progress. Yet he finds himself on the edge of its promise.
Yes, exactly. The Enlightenment offered light, but Faust discovers that reason alone can't satisfy the soul.
And then, as Goethe matured, the world changed again.
Yes, Romanticism arrived. Suddenly there was emotion, nature, passion, and imagination, valued as deeply as logic.
This is where Faust becomes more than a scholar. He becomes a seeker, not just of knowledge, but of experience, of the fullness of being alive.
And Goethe stood between those two worlds, the Enlightenment and Romanticism. And Faust reflects that. The play becomes a meeting place of both reason and passion, reality and the mystical unknown.
I find it fascinating that the Faust story didn't begin with Goethe.
Yes, actually, the legend is older. It's rooted in German folklore. Early chapter books told the tale of a scholar who made a pact with the devil for knowledge and power. Over time, writers adapted it to reflect the anxieties of their age. So, fear of forbidden knowledge, fear of hubris, fear of stepping beyond the human boundary.
Goethe transformed it entirely. He kept the bones of the legend, but gave it a new heart. Psychological depth, philosophical richness, and an exploration of what it means to be human in a world that is both orderly and mysterious.
And, and perhaps the most extraordinary thing is how long Goethe lived with Faust. He began the earliest drafts, what we now call the Urfaust, in the 1770s. Then he carried with him for decades.
Which means that Faust traveled with him through youth, through middle age, and into old age. Each revision absorbed new experiences, new questions, new wisdom.
Yes, you're right. It's a lifetime inside of a single work, shaped by a man who himself was shaped by two great intellectual movements and by his own inner evolution. If we can open the door for listeners gently and compassionately, we can introduce a word that changes everything. That word is yearning.
And when we understand all of this, Sarah, the Enlightenment's courage, Romanticism's passion, the ancient legend, Goethe's lifelong returning to the text, we understand why yearning is the center of our conversation today. And Faust is a person who yearns intensely, painfully, beautifully.
Because Faust's yearning is not only his, it's the yearning of an age. And perhaps it's the yearning of every age, that desire to know, to feel, to become more than we are, and to find meaning somewhere between earth and heaven.
And belonging prepares the way for yearning.
Not ambition, not despair, or intellect. It's yearning. It's that quiet ache for meaning, for more. And suddenly, this work is no longer intimidating. It actually is quite familiar. It's human. It's welcoming.
Sarah, that is the key. Once someone feels that yearning inside themselves, it becomes a mirror. It becomes a companion, Faust is no longer a book written for scholars. It becomes a home for questions they already carry within us.
Exactly. And maybe that is the new word we are giving them. More. More of themselves, more of the world, more of what cannot be seen, but can be felt.
And perhaps that is why your insight moved both of us so much, because this is not a podcast about explaining a text. It is a podcast about welcoming people into wonder, into longing, into humanity. When we meet Faust, he is surrounded by books, yet starving for meaning. But today is the pause before that encounter, the moment when we step softly together into his word.
Yes, and because we have sat with memory and yearning, we no longer approach Faust as a stranger. We approach him as someone who longs, just as we long. Oh, Rebecca, thank you for this conversation. These pauses are where understanding deepens.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to our listeners for walking with us. Next time, we enter Faust's study, the library, and meet the man at the heart of this great enigma.
Thank you for joining Rebecca and I in this moment of reflection. So until next time, may your journey continue in light, in questioning, and in the quiet courage.
This is Rebecca and Sarah. And this is Faust, Unraveling the Great Enigma.